Welcome to the History and Music Podcast. This is your host, Scott Gifford. I am joined by Sean, as always. How you doing, Sean?
I'm all right. I have my two front teeth back, so we're good, man.
I noticed that. You don't have a lisp.
You didn't say anything.
I didn't.
Ironically, I know we've been talking about this like 3 episodes in a row, and nobody really cares, except for maybe my mom. But you'd be surprised how many people don't notice that I literally had my 2 front teeth knocked out and just never said anything. And then after I got them fixed, still didn't say anything. I'm like, wait, did you guys think I always looked like this? Or maybe it's one of those things where they're like, oh wait, he's missing teeth. Has he always been missing teeth? I don't know. Now I'm too embarrassed to ask, and so they just don't say anything.
That's
anyway,
funny.
we're good.
Well, you look
though.
good. You look
Thanks,
really
man.
good.
Happy to be here.
I'm also joined by Dr. Bennett. How's it going?
Good to be here. It's exciting to see the high tech sound editing techniques on display here. That's
oh yeah.
He had just so for the listeners back home, he had the headphones cupped over the microphone for the track. So it was just
I'll go in
here.
and edit. Hey, I'm gonna go in post. I'm gonna go into Audacity, which I got for free, and put the actual song on, so it's gonna sound really good. Which to the audience, how awesome was that throat singing? That was pretty sweet. I had to get it. The intro had to be long enough so we could get some of that cool singing.
Well, and also, we work with the materials we've got, because it's not every day that we record from the high Mongol steppe. So you kind of work with what you got, you know.
Yeah. We're recording, or we're listening to this from a YouTube video where the artist Batzorig Vaanchig, I probably butchered that, but it's a YouTube video where he's singing from the peak of a jagged mountain in the steppe behind him. It's pretty cool video. But so that throat singing, I actually was first introduced to it by a professor in college that had, I don't know, like 10 years ago, he heard it or something and then learned it, and he throat sung in class, and it was pretty cool. I later tried it and practiced for a little bit, but could never get that 2 notes going at the same time thing that they do. It's pretty cool.
He's got like little kids doing it. Have you seen? If you look around, you can find he's got like a class of little kids that do it.
Oh, he started a school.
I mean, from my understanding, is like he's sort of the sensei, the main sensei of like Tuvan throat singing. So
is he the Khan of the khoomei throat singing?
The great Khan, the supreme,
the great Khan. He's they call it. How do they pronounce? Is it khoomei? Is that how they pronounce? Isn't that the word in Mongolian for the throat singing? Like what you're hearing is what they call khoomei, isn't it, or khoomei?
Oh, I don't know.
I think it's what they refer to it as. That's basically comes to like guttural or a certain type of throat singing, which is actually a very ancient method to sing. And they theorize that the way this type of singing got its start, because it's almost exclusively like an Asiatic kind of practice, is because in Mongolia you have these huge wide open spaces, like a lot of plains, a lot of wide open skies. You do have some mountains and so forth, but when you sing that way in these wide open areas, you can sometimes go to a valley or something like that and get like this really good echo or really good vocalization and projection of your voice in Mongolia. And so it lends itself really well to have this sort of guttural throat singing in their traditional homeland, which I thought was kind of cool.
I like that. I like when traditions like that are so closely linked to the actual place that they came from.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Well, we're already, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, anyway, we kind of passed over. We're joined by Dr. Bennett.
Good to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Yeah. The people want to know who we're talking to.
Yeah. So I run a group called Exit. It's a fraternal organization for guys trying to be more sovereign and break free from a lot of the structures of coercion. From your HR department to, Jannies on Twitter to just all these sort of backdoor, underhanded ways that the system that we live in gets people to comply. And I've been doing that for a little over a year. And I also run a similar group at with Tom Woods, who's a relatively well-known libertarian podcaster. And I have a Substack. And those are the big things. And I got 5 kids with 6 on the way. Well, not 5 and 6 on the way. The 6th is on the way. And
nice. Congrats, man! Is that the first time you've said that on the air?
Yeah, I guess so. You heard it here first. This is a
you heard it here
History
first,
and
folks.
Music exclusive.
we'll put that in the Patreon so you can hear that behind the paywall.
There you go. Yeah, no, many strong sons, and this will be my oldest is a girl, and this next one is also going to be a girl. So we're pretty excited for her to have a baby sister. Finally, she's been praying and learning about when the answer to your prayers is no for about 4 years. So she finally is getting her baby sister. She's pretty excited.
Hey, her faith and diligence paid off, though.
That's right.
So, well, congrats, man. That's awesome. I'm happy for you. So, what other than obviously like Mongolian throat singing, what kind of music do you listen to on the regular, or did you kind of grow up listening to?
Oh man, I mean, if you saw like my baseline playlist, it would like date me very precisely to like Radiohead and Queens of the Stone Age and like Primus. So my mom was younger, so I actually was into a fair amount of like 90s. Like she was in her 20s in the 90s, so like she was still like hip and listening to new stuff. So Metallica and Pearl Jam and that kind of thing, Nirvana. So yeah, that's kind of where I grew up. Lately though, like I mean, mostly I listen to music when I work out. So I kind of gravitate toward music that's like mildly psychoactive, like the Doom soundtrack. That is really good for lifting. Some electronic stuff. It's more of like a tool almost, rather than something that I'm sort of consuming as entertainment. And this definitely qualifies, by the way.
Oh, good. I really like soundtracks. They certain ones, they help you focus, right? Because when you're doing like complex work or something, you don't want lyrics to bug you.
Yeah, well, I mean, you can't like you couldn't study to the Doom soundtrack. It's it's Mick Gordon, and it's like very intense metal. So it's more like you're sort of clawing your face off, kind of crazy music. But I did. So as far as like to study to, I used to love the Braveheart soundtrack. That would be my like go-to like ambient.
That's a good one.
Really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's a healthy practice to use music as a tool in whatever you're doing, whether it be studying or relaxing or getting pumped up. So what does this song do to you? This it's called Chinggis Khaanii Magtaal.
Yeah, it's very rousing. It's very it makes you want to go conquer Central Asia, I suppose. And I mean, a lot of his stuff. Well, he's got a variety of things. There's one I can't remember the name. He's got these set of songs that he does like in his living room with his with kids around him and aunts and uncles and stuff that are a lot more like gentle and wholesome. And this one is much more of like a battle hymn. And yeah, I like it quite a bit.
It's an old song, right?
That's what I hear.
Like the history of the song itself. What do we know about that?
All I know is that there's lots of versions of it, and it's a traditional. It's a folk song. English language information on this song is pretty thin on the ground, but it's interesting to see how Genghis Khan, based on the lyrics, how he has sort of been integrated into like the Tengri religion. Like
Right.
it's not a secular song. He's like an instrument of heaven and a divine conqueror. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah. Well, and just to jump right into it, because the song is called Chinggis Khaanii Magtaal, which is a butchering of the Mongolian name, but I've seen different renderings of the actual title in English, and it's either Ode to Genghis Khan or In Praise of Genghis Khan, just depending on how you want to interpret the word Magtaal. But it's interesting that that this song still persists today, because Genghis Khan or Genghis Khan, if you're a historian of sorts. I mean, the guy lived from the 1100s to like the beginning of the 1200s, and it's amazing that we still have folk songs being sung today, 2022, about this guy, or that we even know anything about him at all, because this is almost pre-written language for a lot of these peoples, like these steppe nomad horse peoples. So it's pretty amazing that we have a song like this that it can still be relevant today. It still kind of stirs the blood today about somebody that none of us here really have any specific connection to, but it still does. So it kind of awakens something in us, which I appreciated by your suggesting of this song, Dr. Bennett. But can you just give us, before we get to the lyrics, can you kind of give us like just a rough idea of just how you found the song, or what your experience with this song specifically is, or maybe why you picked it?
Well, guys were having a lot of fun with like the Steppe LARP on Twitter back like maybe 4 years ago. This kind of Bap and Hakan, a lot of those guys were talking. Well, I mean, some of it is related to like, and you mentioned not having a connection to him, but like some of it was talking about like the sort of the Yamnaya and the Indo-Aryan horse lords that conquered Eurasia, way before this. And so viewing the Mongols as sort of the last holdout of this like conquering on horseback lifestyle that really that dominated Eurasia for centuries. And in the sort of revisionist BAP view, formed the seedbed for like every European ruling class. So, and like it's drawing clear parallels between the horse lords and like the Viking conquerors who then became the Norman elite, who then became the British ruling class. Sort of an idea that all of these ruling classes are connected, at least by sort of lineage and talking about Proto-Indo-European myth, how there's kind of commonalities, and like he talks about the Tengri as the representation of the open sky, and I don't know if you want me to like just jump in, but like we get you really used to saying Heavenly Father, but what we're saying is our Father in the sky, and like the fact that he's up there is like sort of so natural and intuitive that you almost don't even like think about it. But when you hear it said as like, when you hear it sort of run through the Google Translate twice, and it comes back as like the God in the sky, it sounds really alien, but we're saying the same thing. And I think from what I understand, the Proto-Indo-European title is Jus Pater, and which
Father,
means
Father God.
No, Jus, I believe, means in the heavens. Let me see here. We're gonna do some.
Well, I was thinking. I was trying to look at like the Latin roots in those two words, and it seemed like that's what it made my mind go to. But as we know, I have almost zero credentials, so I could be totally wrong.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is from Wiktionary, so my source is clearly superior. But yeah,
Obviously, yeah.
Zeus means sky or
Well vetted.
heaven or sky god.
Okay.
So yeah, it's heavenly father, which of course is where Jupiter comes from. That's the Roman god, is the god of the heavens, the thunder god. And
Yeah. Well, what? Sorry. Go ahead.
well, so just to say, like, one of the things that I like to do is to sort of look at other religious traditions and try to see what they held on to from the primordial, I mean, in my view, the Adamic religion, what they held on to, what they changed, what is still, because we believe, like, if we believe that the reason that people are so motivated by and inspired by these other religious traditions is that they are motivated by the truth that's in them. They're motivated by what the Spirit bears witness to. And so I like to sort of look back and see what about it is lighting them up. What's the truth there?
Yeah, what's persisting amongst all these different languages and cultures from ancient times till now? It's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah, and I find it interesting because, like, even in the, like, I still have this YouTube video up with him and the step behind him, and it's just a big blue sky, and so it's like you look at their surroundings, like where they grew up in the actual, like, physical place that they're at, and how that might affect both their language, it affects a lot of things, but it also includes, like, their religion, like what their main god is literally the sky god Tengri, and it makes sense considering how much sky they have. It feels like they have lots of open space, big sky. Like,
well, it's like a Montana on steroids. Isn't Montana like the big sky country or whatever? Because you have these beautiful blue skies. And, in preparation for this episode, as I was backpacking through Ulaanbaatar, that one thing I realized is that Mongolia is actually known for having not just blue skies, but having, like, sunny blue sky weather virtually all year long. They have something like 300 days of sunny blue sky weather almost all year round. And so if you have a people who grew up in an environment like that, then it's no wonder that that's kind of where their worship would centralize.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and when the storms come through, there's nothing to stop them, and so they're extremely. I mean, I grew up in Texas. I grew up kind of in the prairie and Tornado Alley. And one of the things, like, I went to BYU for college and lived in Colorado for a while. And, mountains are beautiful, but what I missed was the scope, the vastness of the sky, and the fact that it's this swirling, dynamic, changing thing. Whereas the mountains, they look the same every day. And I think, especially because it's what brings the rain, makes the grass grow. It's what can, knock over your yurt. Like, just sort of a lot of the uncontrolled natural environment for those guys was the sky.
It
Right.
was a harsh reality. Well, and something else, Dr. Bennett, that when you were talking, that kind of brought to my mind is: are you guys familiar? Have you ever heard of the Sapir-Whorf theory or Sapir-Whorf hypothesis in linguistics? It's this idea that that the language you speak, like your native language, is how you shape the reality around you, or how you cognitively, like, process the world around you. And so that's why you have certain peoples who speak certain types of languages that may be considered a little more harsh of a language, or a little more beautiful or whatever. Their worldview oftentimes will mirror or mimic that. And oftentimes it's the idea is it's all stemming from the language. And you were talking about, Dr. Bennett, like, in our theology, we call, God, the deity that we worship, the primary deity we worship is Heavenly Father. And I started my mission in Brazil, and in Portuguese, the word they use for Heavenly Father is literally Pai Celestial, which is literally celestial Father. And it's still this idea of in the heavens, but it's almost more of like an even more expansive and just It's like a celestial following the same theology. It's a higher kingdom than all the other kingdoms of glory that the Lord has. So I don't know anything about Mongolian, the language, but I suspect that a language that's so ancient and so steeped in just the culture and the world around them, that it probably shaped what kind of people these guys were and who Genghis Khan was.
Well, I'm sure it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing. Like, did the people shape the language, or the language shape the people? Or
Yeah.
But yeah, you see that with like the sex-based languages where there's feminine and masculine, like how that shapes. I'm sure that shapes people's minds differently. Well, this is a lot of preamble about what the song is. Should we get into the song?
Yeah, works for me.
It's not. There's not a lot of lyric, so it's not like we're not going to like glean a bunch of history out of it. So we'll just be throwing in anecdotes, I suppose, about the Great Khan as we go.
Yeah.
Bennett, do you want to start with the first line? Do you have it?
Yeah.
And again, this is translated from Mongolian, so. But I think every translation we found, we talked about it. They're all about the same. So it's, I think whatever we have is going to be as close as we're going to get.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
Blessed by the eternal sky, born of the steppe, everywhere in blue-skied Mongolia, his name resounds in the world. And there's one of the things that I think is interesting is that it's definitely like he seems to occupy kind of a religious position in Mongol culture, and like he's almost sort of like the father Abraham, and like almost in a literal sense, because he's like the progenitor of. I was actually doing a write-up on this. Something like 18% of the population in the lands that he conquered are his direct descendants.
In China specifically, yeah.
Yeah. And
it's like 0.5% of the entire world, right?
It's a lot, yeah. And, one of the things that I found interesting about that is there's not a lot of like Khan energy in like Uzbekistan right now. Like not to like dog on him or anything, but like it's the people, just normal people. Like the Uzbeks look like Uzbeks, and the Kazakhs look like Kazakhs, and the Han look like Han. And even though they've all got this descent from Genghis Khan, it's sort of like homeopathic. Like it's been diluted and diluted and diluted until it's, you can find it in a petri dish in a microscope, but like, do they look like him? Do they act like him? Basically what I was thinking about is he's sort of like the test case for like this vision that I feel like some of us instinctively have of like sort of becoming immortal through our children.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, nope. You're not going to become immortal through your children. They're going to be very different from you. They're going to be like their mother and their mom's parents and aunts and uncles, and then their kids are going to have kids who are it's going to be a quarter of you, and then an eighth, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like, you brought up Abraham. What you're talking about reminds me of the children of Israel. They split up into tribes, and they all have like their own thing, and then they're obviously not always faithful, and God has to rebuke them and all that stuff. And so it's like, yeah, it's without a unifying religion or myth or something. They're not. Mm-hmm. Your progeny isn't going to be like you unless you're intentional about it,
and not necessarily going to be a people. And I was talking to a friend of mine who's Jewish. And I was talking to him kind of about this subject, like, because, I am of the tribe of Ephraim. And like, whether you accept that, right? And whether you accept that factual claim or not, like, it certainly could be true. Like it's entirely plausible that some of the children of Abraham could end up blonde and blue-eyed, and some of them might, like my friend, could look Jewish, and it's like, you're radically separate, even though you have the same lineage. And I think Abraham is maybe an example of the best way you could do it, because he both had a lot of kids and inculcated a worldview, a culture. And like that's, Genghis Khan probably wasn't even attempting a project like that, but it's interesting to see the differences.
Yeah, that's I've had to like when the brief study I've done on Genghis Khan in the past few days, it's like you have to keep in mind what were his goals. Like what
Right.
it makes so much more of what he did more clear to imagine what his goal was, which was just to, I don't know, take over as much land as possible in as fast a time as possible. I mean, according to what he
I
did,
almost
that's what it seemed like. But
I almost think he just liked war. Like I almost he wasn't like optimizing for wealth or optimizing for
no, for
uh,
longevity, for anything, yeah.
yeah,
Well,
I think he
and
liked to
what
fight.
makes Yeah, and we've talked about that on one of our first episodes that we did together. Is we kind of talked about how there are some dudes out there that are just that's in their blood. Like that, all of us are built for violence and war, right? We know that, like just
Mhm.
our sex, our gender as males. But I think there's some guys that get the lion's share of that, and they do things like conquer the known world and have the largest contiguous empire in history. Because they just
Yeah.
have that drive. And it's interesting about we talk about Dan Carlin a lot on this show. And I know before and prep for this, Dr. Bennett, we mentioned about the Wrath of the Khans, this series that Dan Carlin did on Genghis Khan. And it's interesting that he conquered like the known world of his day, the largest empire in history, and we're not even sure what he looks like. We're not even sure when he was born. We're not even sure where he was born. There's so many details we don't know about him, about such an illustrious figure that has been so mythologized that it's pretty amazing that it still persists today. And you were talking about this whole synthesis between like religious with like a founding father kind of aspect. I think sometimes as Americans we do that with our founding generation, but to Mongols, this guy is not only almost a deity, but he also is like their George Washington. He's considered the father of Mongolia, even though this
Right.
is like 1,000 years ago. And it's crazy because if you look at his actual actions, especially by today's standards, which you should never do, by the way. I mean, this guy is like, in today's parlance, he's literally Hitler. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. Right.
and it's funny that he's still so revered.
Well, they don't get mad at him because he didn't discriminate. He wasn't racist. He was just killing everybody. So
Yeah,
it's fine.
but then everyone did that. I mean, people say that. I mean, that's literally every ruler that has done something like this. Has conquered something. They're harsh with their own people. I mean, that's something
Sure.
that comes up a lot when you're talking about Germany. Is like, yeah, you can say the Germans are harsh with other people, but you know what? They were harsh on their own people too. The first people that they jailed or killed or whatever was their own people, and then they went outward.
Well, and what's interesting about Genghis Khan is he's like I don't know if it's opportunist or like just super pragmatic. The way he went about things was like the story of how he gained one of his best generals, Jebi, I think. He was an enemy archer that like I think hit him or something, or like he was really good when he was fighting against him, and then at the end of the battle, when they were rounding everyone up, he's like, "What's your name? I recognize you from the battle." Told him his name. He's like, "All right, your name is now Jebi," which I think means arrow or something, and said, "You're on my team now." And he became one of his generals. And this Jebi guy was like one of his best. I mean, he's in. Some historians have said that he's literally the greatest cavalry general of all of history, which you can't really dispute considering how much they they conquered, right? And so it's like the way he went about things was like whatever is going to get me to make me more powerful, put more, like he would do it. So it's like the way he went about things was very pragmatic, opportunistic.
But what's wild about it is how like he doesn't have a written record. We have nothing ever written by the guy, and so we don't actually know his motivations. Like Bennett was saying, like we don't actually know his motivations for it. There is some mythologizing of his life. Like some people talk about how, oh, his mother was this like warrior lady that was well respected in her tribe, and she used to teach him as a child about how the tribes were always warring amongst each other, and what if someone could unite them one day? But it's almost too good to be true to kind of have like, you know, like the heroic mother telling like this guy who's going to unite the entire world at one point. The story,
if his origin story is correct to be believed, she probably was pretty heroic in some sense. Like, he was the father of a chief, and or his father was a chief, and then his father was poisoned and they got kicked out of the tribe, so they had to live on the outskirts or whatever, and they still survived somehow, and but without the help of the tribe.
Yeah, but his first order of business was, hey, we've got all these warring tribes, and the normal order of business is we're fighting amongst each other. We'll take some of your wives, we'll take some of your horses, the men will kill, or we'll send you out somewhere else in the steppe, and we'll go our separate ways, and we'll see you again in 10 years and do it all over. And that had been going on for centuries before his birth. So it wasn't anything new. But
No.
Yeah, but something in his mind was like, you know what? What if we united all of them? And that's kind of where he started. And that was sort of like the nexus that he built his empire on, was these Mongolian tribal peoples that lived in the, you know, outer Mongolia, inner Mongolia, what we call now Mongolia, the country, parts of Russia. And all of them had this horse culture. They all had this shared mythology, sometimes a shared language, sometimes, but a shared culture of living life on horseback and being nomadic. And that just seemed to be the perfect recipe to conquer the sedentary peoples of the world. And it's what I was going to point out earlier is that line you read, Bennett, the last line of that first verse there, where it says his name resounds in the world. You can literally go anywhere, virtually anywhere, and people have heard of Genghis Khan, which isn't even his real name. His name is actually Temujin. Genghis Khan is his title, right? Which means eternal Khan or eternal emperor. But it's amazing that you can literally go anywhere in any language. People have heard of him. And even today in Mongolia, there's statues of the guy. They just renamed their airport like last year to Genghis Khan Airport, you know, and his name really does resound in the world. And so it's pretty amazing, like just the persistence and what is it about this guy, this figure, that makes people gravitate towards him? Is it living in the glory days? You know, how we kind of like, you know, how America used to be good or whatever. Is it the same thing with Mongolia? Hey, in the 1200s, man, we were awesome. Make
Mongolia great again.
Yeah.
Make Mongolia great again.
Return.
The Who has this music video where, I can't remember which one it is. It's not Wolf Totem. It's the other one that they've got. But it starts with them watching soccer and eating Cheetos and goofing around in their like modern lives, and then they hear the traditional Mongol. Man, maybe we should have just done that song, because it's way more like there's way more sort of like subtext to it, I think. But like
next episode.
Yeah, but they start jamming on these instruments and they're singing, and it's like this very self-consciously like reactionary, like we gotta stop screwing around with all this modern stuff and get back on our horses and start being like Genghis Khan again. So yeah, I think for sure that's part of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had there's a guy I knew that served his mission in Mongolia, and he told me it's like 30% of Mongolian population today is still nomadic. They're still living in the gers or the yurts or whatever. They're still moving around on horseback. So half or a little more than half the population lives in Ulaanbaatar, the capital, but a lot of them are still doing the nomadic thing. And I don't know any other quote unquote modern country in the world where you're still living your ancestral way, or there's a large portion, at least a quarter of your population is still living the way their ancestors did 1,000 years ago. And you could change very little, you know?
Yeah, that's wild. That's and
like, I mean, it's like either that or they're like in like a fluorspar mine, or like it's like heavy industry, and like it's not like and it's Ulaanbaatar, from what I understand, is one of the most polluted cities in the world. Like it's not a they don't have like a great modern urban like situation.
So the alternative to nomadic is to be like in a disgusting city, basically.
Well, I mean, it's because a lot of it is like Stalinist infrastructure.
Yeah, I was going to say, to speak to that, they were literally communists or a client state, which is a nice word for a puppet state of communist Russia, until 1990. I mean, that's when they had their revolution, but they've still got like the communist statues in the middle of the city. And Ulaanbaatar is not the original name of the city. That literally means red warrior, which is freaking communist. And they changed that to that name in like the 20s. So I think they're still kind of coming out of the throes of communism.
Yeah,
as well.
And wasn't it while they were under a communist rule, they weren't able to even speak about Genghis Khan?
Yeah, he was considered reactionary for the communist leader. And actually, during the time, I guess there was some talk of I don't think it was building a statue to him or something, but this is back during the Cold War. And the Secretary of State of Mongolia, was dismissed by communist Russia because of that, because he was basically kind of pushing for, that little bit more of a nationalistic feel to their communism in Mongolia.
It's pretty hard to make Genghis Khan a hero of the global proletariat. So, like, I get it. I do want to show it, like, just read some of this. It's Juve Juve U is the name of the song by The Who. I'll read a little bit. It's been so long, eating and drinking, being merry, how strange. Taking our great Mongol ancestors' names in vain, how strange. Would not honor our oath and destiny. Why the valuable ethics of the ancestors become worthless. Hey, you traitor, kneel down. Hey, prophecies, be declared. You're born in the ancestors' fate, sleeping deeply, can't be awakened, blindly declaring that only Mongols are the best. Born to live as nobles, yet can't unite as one. Why is it difficult to rise our nation up, etc.? So it's very on the nose. It's clearly like let's be a Khanate again. Oh, Black Banner, be awakened, be awakened. Oh, the Khanate, rise and rise forever. Yeah, they're trying to return. They're trying to return pretty hard.
Yeah. Yeah, that
God
seems like it's interesting that because I've heard of The Who and I've probably listened to that song, but I've never known what the lyrics were.
Well, and for a little bit of context on what we're talking about, I mean, the Mongols were known for many things, but one thing that seems to be a hallmark of these people is they're extremely hardy. I mean, they would live basically off their horses. They had this like symbiotic relationship with their horses. And so their horses could basically forage almost anywhere, these steppe ponies they would ride. And they could survive a month, the Mongols could, a month without food or water, because they would literally, all their horses, most of them were mares. They were female. And they would drink the horse's milk. Sometimes they'd do a little incision on the horse and they drink their blood. And that's how they get their sustenance when they were low on food. And you could basically just live like that for a month. And their enemies, they would chop their head off and make a cup out of their skulls and drink out of their skulls. And so you go from that to living in like a post-communist, brutalist architecture wasteland. It's like, you know what? I kind of like our glory days a little bit. Maybe, yeah, they were violent, but hey, we had some pride and people respected us and people had actually heard of Mongolia,
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe we should go back to that Pax Mongolica.
I mean, I think about just the other day, I was looking at the weather in Harare, which is the capital of Zimbabwe, which was once Rhodesia, and
we call
Cape
it
Town,
Salisbury,
South Africa.
Salisbury.
Yeah, Salisbury. And, San Diego and the Gold Coast in Australia. And I was thinking about sort of the Anglo Imperium that Cecil Rhodes was trying to build. And it's the same like ambivalence about conquering, but the self-confidence, the self-assuredness, the will to be the best is very admirable, and you wish that you could belong to something that had that kind of confidence. Yeah,
I always wonder if that kind of confidence or that drive is lost, like with the advent of modernity. Like when I was my introduction to history classes at BYU Hawaii, that seemed to be like the prevailing theme was, well, what is modernity? Can you define it? Okay, what is it? Is it a positive or a negative? And it's almost always a negative, but it I don't know. I mean, you can't get away from it now because progress can only progress. And we're now we have this time where we like to think back on, the good old days and like our glory days. And like, why can't I be more like rustic and hardy like my great grandfathers? And there may not, unless we have some sort of a post-apocalyptic, nuclear holocaust that forces us to live that way, I don't think you can ever actually get back to that. You can try and LARP all you want, and it's kind of fun to do that, but I still can't but feel a twinge of sadness that it's lost, I
mean, Genghis Khan's like great grandsons, it was like one generation removed from his death, because he died when Kublai Khan was young, his grandson. But I mean, basically right after Kublai Khan, it was like, it's like Jabbalub the okay and Jabbalub the died pretty early, and like it's not, they're not extraordinary rulers. That they sort of fall off almost immediately, and a lot of it's because they sort of got they adopted sort of like the palace culture of the Han and became sort of emasculated and fat and lazy. Basically, as soon as they were exposed to that kind of wealth.
Yeah, well, there's a saying. I'm going to paraphrase it and probably butcher it, but it's like the wood shoes go up the stairs at empire, and the silk slippers come down. And it's that whole idea that great men create good times create weak men, and that whole cycle. And you're exactly right, Bennett, because that's what happened. Is like within 50 years of this guy dying, they had conquered like a large chunk of the world. But within a few years of that, it turns to infighting, and they just basically can't hold a candle to this guy's legacy and the type of unifying figure he was. And I think part of that is probably that a loss of that edge that made him what he was, that living on the steppe, that made him like that sort of hard-bitten kind of guy he was, that would have to do something like this, conquer the world. Should we? We only got to the first verse. Should we keep going?
Yeah, let's keep going.
The next, I'll do the next one. The next two lines is kind of like the chorus, which is the courageous Mongol Genghis, the sublime Lord Genghis. And then the next verse is, even in burning wounds, a mind strong as steel, like temporal swords, as powerful as a planetary bird. Now, we were talking before the show about those lines, like temporal swords, as powerful as a planetary bird. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Because I'm thinking that is not, that some of that's lost in translation, some of the power of those lines.
Yeah, I have a feeling those are in reference to the shamanist religion that Genghis Khan was very devout in, because it's it's an interesting religion. Tigris, we talked about a little bit, but I think like a planetary bird must refer to some type of god or something like that, I'm thinking.
I mean, it's funny because when I put it into Google Translate, it's like it's not even the same like words. So like I feel silly trying to parse like what this translation might mean. Yeah, but so what it says on Google Translate is, from the middle of the fire, hard as steel, on earth as strong as a bird. So I don't know. So maybe planetary bird, like on earth as strong as a bird. I don't know.
Oh, interesting. I know Mongolia. There's like lots of falconry there, right? I wonder if there's the tie into that.
Well, we talked about earlier, like the idea of the sky, right? The sky god, and where's a bird make his abode? In the sky.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fire surgery from the middle is that even in burning wounds. So something to do with getting cut up and burned. I mean, maybe it's
cauterizing a wound.
Yeah, because he's tough as nails. Even in burning wounds, his mind is strong as steel. I'd buy that for $1.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. For sure.
So then after that, all we have is the chorus again, the courageous Mongol Genghis, the sublime Lord Genghis. Do you want to take the last verse there, Scotty?
Yep. Blessed by the sky above, possessed half the world, ingrained in his spirit, in the majestic and mighty world. Ingrained is his spirit. Sorry, in the majestic and mighty world. Yeah, it's just kind of further building him up as this larger than life character, almost a deity.
But definitely somebody that has the mandate of heaven, right? For his conquest.
Yes. He's like I mean, he's like a demigod, basically, right? Blessed by the sky above. Makes it seem like he's, the mandate of heaven, more than a normal person. Sean, you're muted.
Sorry about that. The song has the chorus one more time, then it ends there, and that's all we have to work with. But we've kind of been coming back to this idea of like persistence, like things that persist. And Bennett, you're talking about this guy as like Chinggis Khan, if you're speaking Mongolian, Temujin, if you're saying his actual name, like how he sort of an experiment, if you will, in immortality. Trying to achieve immortality through your own actions, your own works. And I think a case can be made on both sides, because as we talked about, this guy's empire, the Mongol Empire, did persist much longer, a long time past his death. The Mongol Empire lasted for, I think it was like itself as intact peace, I think for about 100 years, but you kind of felt the ripples or the repercussions of that empire for up until almost the modern age. I mean, you have successor states to the Mongol Empire that existed all the way until like the 1850s. You've got the Mughal Empire in India. You've got the Crimean Khanate, in Crimea. That's in Europe, and that all sort of claimed direct lineage back to this one guy.
Well, and even if it's not like the intact empire, like the trade routes, the relationships, and stuff like that
Silk Road,
that came about because of this empire,
it's his deeds.
Was all due to him.
It's the contrast between I guess the contrast that I would draw is not like, because obviously the fact that we're talking about him right now in 2022 means that his deeds persisted. It's more to do with is the answer just to like have a bunch of kids? I feel like a lot of people in this sort of like trad dad culture, they want to think like I'll just have kids and that'll be my legacy. That'll be the mark that I leave on the world. And the Greek notion of immortality that Bap talks about a lot is kleos aphthaton, which is undying fame, and it's the idea that your deeds will ring out and poets will sing of you forever, which is sort of what he achieved. And I mean, like in terms of like his material impact on the world, it's pretty obvious that like he probably made more of a difference through the millions of genetic lines that he snuffed out than the ones he created.
Yeah.
And I mean, yeah, so it's and the idea of kleos aphthaton is complicated too, but just it's interesting to think about like the most extreme cases, the most extreme human mortal movers in the world, and what it all amounted to.
Yeah. Well, and it's almost like, I mean, what legacy is more important? The fact that everyone, whether they want to or not, in the world is pretty much descended from this guy, and maybe either doesn't know it, or they know it and they don't like it, or there's a handful that does like that, or the fact that we all know him for his deeds, right? I mean, is there which one has a higher value?
It depends on at what point in history you're at. I think maybe if you're like 1 or 2 or 3 generations past him, then maybe it is more important to be his literal descendant. But as time goes on, I think that answer changes probably.
Well, and what's ironic about that, the statement of which one has more value, is he did both, right? Yeah. He basically like got his DNA into the bloodstream of history, but he also conquered the largest chunk of the world that anyone's ever seen. And so whether you know him because you're related to him, or whether you know him because of his actions, either way, he comes out on top, right? And so like you're saying, Bennett, with this whole like trad dad movement of like, oh, I'm just going to have like 8 billion kids and that's how I'll leave my legacy. And that does work to some degree. But I think if you don't have that, a type of culture or a type of family structure where you're reflecting back on your ancestors and who you descended from and what brought you to where you are today, that's not going to work as well. So you have to kind of create an environment where your legacy can persist by not only having those children, but also like leaving them something, teaching them something, teaching about where they came from, so to speak.
Well, yeah, and basically, it seems like the way that they did, because I looked at sort of the families of Genghis Khan and his next, I think, 3 generations of rulers. And it seems to be the case that basically they had their like monogamous one family that they actually like cared about, and maybe 1 or 2 concubines who they would sort of maintain a lifestyle for, but like their kids wouldn't inherit, and they wouldn't like it was sort of like you get to be rich and high status because you're the Khan's concubine, but you don't get to, you're not sort of a political player. And then, but the one wife, the main wife, was like raising the heir to the throne, and the heir would be sort of chosen from among those children. And then it seems like everything else, all the other extracurriculars, were just no contact, no involvement. Which, I mean, of course, like tens of thousands of people. So like, how could you possibly? Mm-hmm. But yeah. So in a sense, like in terms of how he actually acted as a father to his children that he was acknowledging as his heirs, it's more sort of scaled down and standard than would appear from how many kids he produced.
Well, and I think, I mean, we talk about how, people may not be familiar with like what he's accomplished, or they may like disparage Genghis Khan because, oh, you killed my, 8th great grandfather 1,000 years ago in China. But Dan Carlin, going back again to Wrath the Khans, in the very beginning, he talks about how as a college, like an early college student, he wrote a paper on Genghis Khan, like did a research paper on him, and kind of wrote glowingly of like how great the cavalry was and their tactics were so just unstoppable. And his teacher at the time was Chinese. Like this is in the U.S., but his teacher was Chinese, and his teacher basically gave him an F on his paper and brought him into the office, and he's like, "Look, some people don't. Some people are basically what he said was some people are still mad. They're still mad at Genghis Khan, like at least in China. He's not looked at as like this unifying like father figure, father of the country. He's looked at as like this butcher, literally Hitler, if you want to call it in today's language. But I think a lot of it does depend on, okay, where are you from, and how tied into your country's or your family's history are you, kind of will determine what your opinion of this guy is. Mm-hmm. Because, I mean, the estimates are he killed 11% of the population of the world.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something like 37 million people or something.
Yeah.
I read somewhere, I don't know how true this is, but some climate scientists say that because of the depopulation that he caused, the Earth actually cooled down because of how many people he killed.
Yeah, I read that too. That it says that it was actually a good thing because he scrubbed 700 million tons of carbon from the atmosphere and allowing forests to regrow.
Yeah,
yeah.
Wild.
He's a climate hero.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's he was an ESG hero.
Yes, he was. What's crazy, and you can't get into talking about Genghis Khan without going over some crazy numbers. But he did it with only an army of 100,000 people. So his army, which is big, but it's not super big even for the time. He was regularly going against armies bigger than that, and he would deploy maybe a tenth of that per battle or whatever. Like it wasn't a big army; they're just super effective.
Average KD spread 370-1, right?
Yeah,
that's pretty amazing, especially for that era. But the secret to their success was basically archery and horseback, like their horsemanship. So not only could they survive just living off their horses, but every Mongol warrior would have like 2 or 3 horses to his retinue. And so what would happen is they could ride at full speed till the horse they were riding got tired, and they'd switch mounts and keep riding full speed. And they could do that 2 or 3 times. And so they could travel like 100 miles a day, which in this era was completely unheard of. That's like space age speed.
Yeah,
right?
You read about any ancient warfare, and speed is everything, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and their tactics involved, I mean, it's been described as like being attacked by a swarm of bees, but they would be divided into these small units, and they kind of had like, the various commanders of their small units of men, and they were divided by like, 10, 50, 100, 150. And what they do is they're still doing pitched battles here when they're meeting Europeans, and the Europeans all line up with their pikemen or whatever, and a small contingent of cavalry, and the Mongols would send like 1,000 horse archers out there. They'd gallop up, like shoot the crap out of them with archers, or as my professor in history would say, rain pointy death down on them, and then just gallop away, and they'd untouchable. And they would do this so many times. Oftentimes, people would just forfeit the battle based on that alone. But if they did try to attack, the horse archers would wear them down so much, their fighting spirit was so sapped that anything that was left would get mopped up by these lancers that they all had also on horseback that the Mongols would employ. And that was basically their entire tactic in every single battle. And people just didn't know how to cope with it.
In StarCraft, we call that kiting. They would pull aggro and then withdraw, and then, real quick hit them and then move.
Yeah, you can actually do that in Age of Empires. You can actually be the Mongols and do exactly this with their unique unit, which is oddly enough a horse archer. So, they're pulling aggro way before StarCraft.
They invented it. They actually did invent a lot of military tactics and like actual technology, putting a hook on their spear to pull someone down or whatever, things like that. Like they revolutionized a lot of things that way. Well, things are winding down a little bit. Any other parting thoughts we have about the Great Khan?
I've got a couple, but I'll let the good doctor share his last thoughts, because I'm always here. I'm always talking, so I don't want to monopolize. As usual. I don't know where I really wanted to go with this. I feel like we covered the big things. It's a fascinating topic, and I wish I knew more about it. There is a book called The Secret History of the Mongols that I'm planning to check out. That's supposedly like the almost scriptural document that seems to be the only source of this time period and like the seminal work on the Mongols.
It's what they got.
And it's got a cool, mysterious name. So
yeah, it does. And it's like Kublai Khan was literate, as far as I know, or he was at least very interested in inculcating literacy. So it's a little bit surprising that the history is so shrouded in myth. But I guess, I think he was like 12 when Genghis died, so maybe he grew up and learned to read or something, and then had to kind of piece it together from kind of fish stories that his dad or his grandpa's like bros would tell. I don't know. It's interesting to think about, though. Mm-hmm. But that's all I got.
Well, we already talked about like this legacy this guy has left, and like just everything in Mongolia is named after Genghis Khan or some version of his name. In fact, there's been they've introduced legislation in Mongolia to basically regulate the use of his name to prevent it from being too trivialized and too over commercialized, because everyone is just Genghis Khan everything.
Genghis Khan macaroni and cheese. Genghis Khan the lunchbox.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and one question.
Vain repetitions, right?
Right. Well, I have one more fun fact that I'll share relating to this guy, and then I have a question. I want to see if you guys. I don't know the answer to it, but I want to see if you guys have any thoughts on it. But so part of this guy's conquest, he conquered most of Asia. He got all the way to Poland, but some of the first territories he conquered was China, and he pummeled the Chinese and the Koreans and the Japanese. But there was 2 different times where his successors were attacking the Japanese home islands, and they were disrupted by a massive storm in the sea of, I think it's called the Sea of Japan, the one that's between China and Japan. And all the Mongol ships basically like sank, which basically prevented them from attacking Japan those two separate times. And so the Japanese called that storm a divine wind, or in Japanese, kamikaze. And that's where the term kamikaze comes from, that persisted all the way into World War II. It literally means divine wind. And it's a word that its origins come from this divine wind that protected the Japanese people from the Mongol hordes.
By smashing their ships.
And that's something like, yeah. And then they use it. And then it turned into a plane smashing into a ship. But I guess the spirit of the word is still there. But so my question is this, and this will be my parting thought, is what do you guys think it is that makes people look positively on Genghis Khan when they could look at him as someone like a Stalin or a Mao or a Hitler? Like why is he looked at so much more positively than other men of history who have done similar things, maybe just more recently?
I think a lot of it's just recency. I think a lot of it's just that he's been gone a while, so now he's like pirates, or nobody's mad at the Assyrians, even though they would like stick a hook through your nose and your ears and drag you on a chain by your face, like, and they'd like kill all of your relatives, and they'd send you like, and everyone you ever heard of, scatter you to the winds, and you'd never see anybody you knew ever again. Like it goes from being horrible to being like kind of metal. And I think
that's based now because it's 1,000 years later.
Yeah, I think Genghis Khan's comfortably metal at this point.
Yeah, and it's almost hard to conceive of that kind of violence. And widespread, like the numbers that we're talking about is just wild. And so I think part of that is like we just can't even think about that.
It's almost unbelievable, the number of the number. Oh, I killed 10% of the world's population 1,000 years ago or whatever. And it's like, what? We can't fathom those kind of numbers.
Right.
But I also think he wasn't ideological. Like, it's kind of like what I was saying about like him not being racist. Like we've gotten so used to ideological struggle that the story of the last of the 20th century was this intense ideological struggle between these three massively propagandized, massively quasi-religious empires with this really totalizing worldview. And Genghis just seemed to like fighting, and he didn't. And he, one of the ways that his empire, one of the ways he kept the peace was like he didn't care what god you worshipped, and he just kind of wanted you to like pay your taxes and not get in his way, not don't talk shit, and don't like, and basically if you were willing to play ball, you would be left alone. And I think there's actually I think it's Moldbug who talks about like, what if an alien invader came and he said, I'm in charge of everything now, and I just care about gold, and I just want to make sure that like you guys give me my gold shipment, and everything else is just about making sure that the gold's there. So I'm going to make sure the economy is pretty strong, and you guys have what you need to go get me the gold. And other than that, you can do what you want. Just make sure I get my gold. And basically Moldbug's case is that like that would be not a bad way to live under the boot of the alien gold dictator. And I think Genghis Khan kind of rhymes with that, like utterly savage to his enemies, but like more or less hands off to his subjects. And I think probably the reason for that is that he wasn't trying to institute some utopian ideological program. Like right. Pol Pot was trying to like change the whole dynamic between urban and rural and educated and uneducated. And he had this like big hoop dreams about what he was going to do for Kampuchea. And Genghis Khan, nope. He just wanted to get some loot, get some babes. I can respect that.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I was talking about at the beginning, where like I was thinking about what his motivations were. because they weren't like ideological. It was, I mean, essentially to get as much gain as possible, like, or however you want to word that. And this, I call it a strategy of like, if you surrender, then you'll be my best friend. If you don't, we will utterly destroy everything, like every living thing, in a brutal way. And it's one of these things that, like, it's a strategy to gain a reputation like that, where it's like, oh, if I go with you, then I'll actually might even gain from being in your empire. So it's like, it's a pragmatism in a way to operate like that, and to be as brutal as possible to the people that do oppose you, so people can see the biggest contrast possible between being my friend and being my enemy.
And one of the points that Moldbug makes about his dictator is, like, you know, he's assuming that, like, this dictator has quantum plasma, unovercomable technical advantages, weapons advantages, and so, like, he can you know, basically turn you to dust if you show the slightest resistance. And he was like, that is a way of keeping the peace. That is a way of ending the destructive conflict. It's kind of sounding like Darth Vader there, but like, you know, putting all that to bed. That's world peace, right? Because nobody's gonna mess around.
We have that now. It's literally called nuclear deterrence. We have it now. They just call it deterrence.
Right. And the problem there is that there's no human being. Oh, this would be Moldbug's problem with it, is that there's no human being. There's this distributed, unaccountable bureaucracy that, like, kind of can't be negotiated with. And like I mean, that's what the Russians are up against right now is this this NATO expansion. I don't want to get too far afield, but like this you know, why does NATO want to expand into Ukraine? Well, because NATO would like to expand. NATO exists to oppose the Soviet Union, which no longer exists. So it's just this sort of growing institution, growing for its own sake, and nobody's really the boss of it.
Because progress. Yeah.
Right.
Well, it exists. It exists to increase itself, increase its power, its size, everything. But no one ever asks, like, do we still need NATO?
Well, it doesn't even ask itself. It just does, right?
There's no self to ask. There's no consciousness. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're right, Bennett, about, like, why the Great Khan here gets a pass on things that people would consider war crimes on a major scale today. And I think time heals all wounds. I think that's one piece. I think you hit the nail on the head too with the whole ideology thing, because nowadays you're like, everyone's got an ideology, right? That's our presentism, our you know, judging by the past, by today's standards. So we think, oh, everything that motivates somebody is something I can relate to, and it's always got to be my current worldview, whatever my version of, like, freedom is, or capitalism, or whatever it is. That's what motivated everybody. Genghis Khan wanted to unify the world so they could be free from the Chinese dynasties that were oppressing them, or whatever it is. And it's like, no, dude, he probably just wanted, like, some more horses and loot.
He grew up in tribal, you know? in tribal warfare, in tribal, like when you were a part of a tribe, that in the steppe, then is like everything was for the good of the tribe, right? And so, like, I think as he expanded, that mindset didn't necessarily stop inside his brain. Like, he was just going for the good of the tribe and expanding the tribe. Like, and I think that's a mindset, like you said, that's not that it's hard to find a map for modern modernity. Like.
Well, you mentioned, like, how do you get back to that way of thinking? And I basically what you're kind of describing is the will to power. It's like, it feels good to conquer. It feels good to be strong. It feels good to dominate. And yeah, that's sort of a foreign language for us. You know,
we hear that and we immediately think Hitler, or right? Like, it's
well,
like
unless
some
you can,
horrible person.
Unless you can launder it through religion or ideology, or like no, I want to conquer so that we can so that little girls can learn calculus in Afghanistan. Like,
Right.
so there can be a gay bar in Djibouti. Like it's that's how you have to wash it to make it make sense to these people.
Well, that's how we've been able to sell it so long. Is like, no. Like, here's the thing: we got to go to war for gay marriage. We got to go to war for whatever your pet ideology is. That's what we're bringing to the world. So that makes it okay. So our war crime is okay.
But those are all just window dressings to will to power, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think when it is, I guess what I would say is I think most of these people are fooling themselves as much as they're fooling anybody else.
100%.
I think that they're quasi sincere, but yeah, they really just want to be in charge of everything so that they can make all the rules. And me too. So, I get it.
Yeah. I think we all have that to some degree, but I think also you can't just go, oh, you know what? I'm going to start like drinking mare's milk and like riding my horse a lot and getting really good with a bow. I don't think you could do that your whole life. And I don't think you're still going to have that same will, that same drive, that same will to power as like a Genghis Khan had.
Well, you'll just get shot. I mean, it's no, that's a big part of this. Well, is like it's you're responding to a completely different technological environment whose problems are not solved. I think a lot of what guys are trying to do when they're going to the return game and the trad game is they're like, well, I want to go back to a time when I could look at the answer key and like the hacks that made people win. I know those hacks, so I'd go be a horse lord, or I'd not necessarily literally like thinking about time travel, but like they're imagining a world that makes sense, but the world is anti-inductive. The fact that it makes sense to you means it would unravel immediately because all of the other people who are just as smart as you would figure out the same things, and you'd end up right back where you are. So yeah, it's I think taking that mindset of the desire to excel, the desire to be the best, the desire to dominate, and then doing the really hard nitty-gritty tactical math of what does that look like here and now? What are the channels through which power flows here? It's not horseback.
Yeah,
it's not archery.
And due to Genghis Khan's pragmatism, his practicality, he obviously wouldn't use the same tactics he used back then. He would use the tools we have now, which we're figuring out, right? It's
he'd be an NGO.
A different game on the ground. What's that?
What was that?
I said he'd start an NGO. He'd start acquiring blackmail on some public figures.
He'd probably be honestly, he'd probably be a Bitcoin guy.
He might be.
He'd be doing the NTX thing.
Is modern day conquering like what Google's doing, just buying small companies and just like taking over small companies?
Is Jeff Bezos con maxing right now? Is that what I'm hearing?
I mean, if you think about another mold bug thing is he talks about corporations as kingdoms, and like if that's the way you want to think about it, like it kind of makes sense.
But in theory, yes, but
yeah, in theory, yeah. Amazon
is so dug in like a tick on the backside of the federal government, and like there's no. It is not independent or sovereign in the way that like the Dutch East India Company was. It's very much a logistical arm of the state, and Jeff
it's a convoluted system.
Jeff is a functionary. Elon has been a functionary, is trying to be something else, and it remains to be seen how successful he'll be at that. But I think that's always the challenge, right? If you're living within this giant Leviathan, then your pathway to personal power means being like kind of this Gavin Newsom figure who says all the right things and kisses all the right asses, and certainly in the short run. I actually believe that about Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger was a classic will to power, fascist, Nietzschean. And he decided that the right way to go about that was to be like a centrist, basically liberal in California, and run for governor and get as much power as he possibly could. But you can see the spiritual impact of that on him, and now he sucks.
Yeah. I mean, you can try and think like, oh, that'll be my strategy to like, I'll infiltrate the system, but to infiltrate the system,
will
you have to
internalize.
Yeah, you have to internalize something.
It corrupts whatever it touches.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't escape the corruption. But to some respect, this whole like return movement, like this idea, I get it, because I feel like today, some people call it nationalism, but this tie to your past, this tie to your ancestors, this tie to your clan, your people, a lot of that's been lost with modernity and just late stage capitalism. And so I think a lot of us are just trying to awaken that blood memory, which I believe is a real thing,
mm-hmm.
but it's not something that we have today. I have to go back like so many generations to find something that's distinctly like my family or my people or English, like because my ancestors are from England. So something that's distinctly English and not something that's like a slight difference to what we do now in America. Because with capitalism and globalization, it's basically we're all same versions of the same thing, different sides of the same coin. That makes sense.
It takes intentionality to do it nowadays. It used to be ingrained, like you were. That's just how it was. Like you didn't have to try. Now it's you have to be intentional, especially like depending on where you grow up. Like I grew up in Utah. I'm a Utahn, and a lot of times Utahns get crapped on, and so it's like a lot of Utahns will eschew a lot of the isms that come from this state. And so sometimes from my point of view, it's like I've actively tried not to eschew those and be who I am, like this is where my family is and has been for generations. And so this is who I am. And it's like, you have to choose to be proud of it to an extent. And not everyone is affected about like this. Like there are places even in America where it's cool and good to be proud of where you're from and where your family's from. But in some cases it takes intentionality.
Well, that's kind of the whole Deseret nationalism movement, right? This whole idea of like, we're proud of our past. So we're not going to hide behind it. We're not going to try and apologize for it.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, hey, this is who we are. The past we have is what made us who we are. And we should teach that to the coming generation, because we should have, we should turn the hearts of our children to the fathers and vice versa, so to speak.
Because our history is pretty badass, and it's kind of Disneyfied almost, and I think that's to our detriment. Like the way a lot of our history is taught, even within the church, is Disneyfied, and so that's what makes it uncool. If it was taught like a Genghis Khan, like not necessarily Genghis Khan, we didn't do that, but if it was taught like it happened, like the reality of it, it wouldn't be as quote unquote lame.
Well, that's what I've been trying to teach my kids now is like, because I grew up in the church as well. I'm not from Utah. I live in Utah now, but I'm from California. But like my family rolls deep in the church, so to speak. I mean, I'm telling my kids like, hey, I have a great great grandfather who was killed at Hans Mill. My great great grandfather Oborn was buried with the Martin Handcart Company in Green River, Wyoming. His body is still out there, buried. Mm-hmm. Like, and I think that's something that's important to not lose with this advance of just everything being fake and gay,
homogenized,
bland, globalization that's sold to the world. And just, I'm not, not for
that's
me.
The curse. That's the curse with which the earth is being smitten, in my opinion, is a curse of sameness, somebody posted a picture of like the skyline of like Hong Kong and Nairobi and Cleveland, and like it's indistinguishable. They all look exactly the same.
Can't tell them apart.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I had a class in college. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, Ben.
No.
Interrupting you.
No, that's all right. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I had a class in college that was literally titled Modern Nationalism and Globalization, and that's exactly what that was about. Is how do you balance this idea of, okay, these are my people, this is my country, this is my shared history and culture, with this globalization where it's like this sameness sold, across the world. And one example I gave in a class is this idea of the country of Ireland. Because do you guys know their official language? It's Irish. But how many people in Ireland actually speak Irish? It's like 5% of the population speak it with any fluency, But I respect the game. I respect the idea, But
same with Wales. Like I think it's
same with Welsh. Yeah, who speaks Welsh? That was like the second language the Book of Mormon was ever translated into was Welsh. Who speaks Welsh now? A bunch of like old people in Wales, and it's dying out very quickly. And you'll have people who try to like LARP at it, but it's almost like we've reached a point of no return. Like with this idea of modernity and globalization, that we can't go back to, okay, I'm going to go back to like living with my clan, my tribe, speaking our language, our culture. You can't avoid it anymore.
Well, there's no returning, right? You have to build. You have to go forward and use the past to make the future better.
Yeah. I'm sympathetic to Balaji Srinivasan's idea that essentially what is happening is that geographic and ethnic loyalties are becoming incoherent because our bodies and our words travel too efficiently, too seamlessly all over the world, and we're just too able to connect with foreigners and too able to we're sort of packed in too tight with people we hate in our geographic neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And so his vision is basically that there's going to be some kind of technological solution for a distributed state where the thing that the primary unit of politics is not going to be these geographically circumscribed ethnoi, population groups, kin groups, because that's no longer coherent. They don't exist anymore. To some extent, that's a consequence of policy, but to some extent, it's also just technology. It's something that's difficult to stop. And so part of what I am trying to do with all of my various online projects is to locate my tribe all over the world and connect them in a way that is more real than just we follow each other on Twitter or we vote the same way. Who cares? Mm-hmm. Like finding the people that you really have that sense of asabiya, the sense of peoplehood with.
Right. Yeah, and that's if anyone knows, it's you, how difficult that is. And it's an iterative journey, right? Like you start on a single platform where you meet each other, and then multiple platforms where you have kind of a distributed way of communicating, and then whatever the next step, but having that goal is important.
Hugely complicated. Yeah, absolutely.
Every time the idea of like a digital nation state or whatever that is, like, I still have the hardest time wrapping my head around it. Just like the forgetting the physical part of it.
Yeah, I've heard his take on what that will look like. I don't know that I don't know that his take necessarily resonates with me about what it will be, but what I do feel pretty confident about is that he's right that the current system is not a coherent map of the way people actually understand themselves and right. understand their relationships.
Yeah, that makes sense. So trying to replicate that digitally?
I mean, I don't know how you do it. I don't even know what it would look like, but I know that the way we do it now is already ceasing to make sense.
Right.
So something will replace it.
Do you think maybe the glue that connects us might be the determining factor? So, because a lot of times what we connect on now is, we have shared mutual. I mean, Scott and I listen to the same music, so now we're friends. Mm-hmm. And not to disparage our friendship, Scott, but do we need something that can persist more than that, more than just shared interests or close proximity?
This kind of gets back to the Genghis Khan's progeny, right? His is like what unified them, and then what disunified them, like what separated them. And I think it is what it comes down to is like a shared. It's kind of hard because at what point, like you said, like we share music, we share some political views, we share some this that, but like how much does it take to actually unify somebody with somebody else?
So
I don't know.
I think all the time about where the family proclamation says the family is the fundamental unit of society.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that is such a profound statement that just went completely under the radar, because we thought that what they were saying was family is important.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think that's what they were saying. I think they're saying the family is the fundamental unit of society. The family is the dimension of analysis at which policy should take place. And what I think that can mean is that politics ultimately, the wellspring of politics, the first states were families. And, some like Nietzscheans and communists and libertarians, a lot of like their model of the first state was the stationary bandit, right? Like, I'm a robber and a raider and I'm stealing stuff. And then I'm just going to sit tight and have a deal where everybody gives me stuff instead of me stealing it. And that's safer and less friction for everybody. And that's how the state began, which I think is bogus. I think basically you had guys like Father Abraham who were powerful and charismatic and blessed by God, and their family, his sphere of influence came to encapsulate a broader set of people than his immediate family. He kind of had a retinue. He had a following, and he intermarried with some of them. And I basically, I guess what I would say is the way that you become more than just acquaintances, the way that you permanently ally is the way that your ancestors permanently allied, which is by marriage. You become, you unite your interests in essentially a child who is the heir of both houses, or a set of children.
Literally united in blood.
Right. And I think ultimately, one of the things that one of the reasons why Genghis Khan's, millions and millions of offspring reflect just the circumstances of wherever they were when they were born, when that line was created, is that there was no effort to select their mates, effort to select like their family circumstances, apart from just whatever was going on in that region. So like basically what I would say is you are looking for people who are the right sort of people with whom you would like to ally in that sense, who you'd like your children to be like them, and you'd like to have their qualities and to have their culture. And the idea that we outsource all of these decisions to the kids who really badly want to have sex is just the dumbest thing I can imagine. That's just almost nobody is less qualified to make that decision. And there's an argument to be made that there's wisdom in the blood, and sort of what gets your motor running is something to be weighed in the balances. I think that's true, but I think families should have much more of a role in the type of people that you marry, like at minimum in like a really strongly advisory capacity.
Well, I actually need to get going. I have a
recital,
dance recital to get to. But I guess
scared you off with that take, huh?
End up. What's that?
So I scared you off with that take, huh?
No. I was going to add on it as a closing note.
Too close to home.
As a closing. I think I can pull a white pill out of what you said, because there's been a couple black pills, but I think you talk about aligning yourself with people that you want to be aligned with, and it wasn't readily available to Genghis Khan's children, right? And children's children, children's children. But we in modernity have the ability to find people, right? We have the ability to
Yes.
find our tribe, and that's what we're doing. That's why we're here together right now. And so I think the church has often referred to the internet and modern stuff as blessings and tools, and I think we need to use them as such, and we
Yes.
are. And so I think the white pill is we are using it to our advantage. It's an uphill battle, but it's there for us. So
Well, and you talk about this a lot, and I'll finish with this. I know you got to go, Scott, but you finish with this a lot, or talk about this a lot. Excuse me, Bennett, in Exit and other things. Is it's not just I want to take care of my family and just like escape from the world and be a lone man in the wilderness, my family, and like live on my own. But you got to worry about who your kid's going to marry. Are they gonna keep creating the same legacy you're creating with the people they marry? And so that should actually be your legacy, is finding a community of people for where your kids can intermarry within that community and do okay and do as well as we've done.
And I can only imagine our ancestors looking down on us going, you have the ability, these people, get together, do it. What's your, like, what, like, if that they're thinking, if I had the ability, I had to take a 3-month boat ride from England to get to Nauvoo or whatever to get to my people. You can get on a plane.
Right.
Do it. What's your deal?
You can get on Twitter.
Yeah, go date that mutual girl in Alberta or whatever. Go do it.
Yeah.
Get it done,
Honestly,
man.
what have you got to lose? Who cares? But hey, so we'll end it here. Bennett, I appreciate coming on the show with us, man. This is actually probably our longest episode ever, so hopefully the kids at home enjoy. But as a parting thought, is there anything that I know you kind of said in the beginning, but is there anything you want to plug or shill, or where can the folks at home connect with you if they need to?
Extra Dead JCB on Twitter, extradeadjcb.substack.com on Substack, and exitgroup.us. Those would be the places.
Cool. And
Thanks,
we'll link
fellas.
those in the show notes as well.
All right, and we'll play the song on the way out, so you can listen to all the awesome throat singing again. Try and pick out some of the lyrics. We'll see you.
Right,
Awesome.
guys.
Thanks, guys.
See ya.
Sean, you're muted.